I think actually the church leaders who say they are not able, they're not authorized by Jesus Christ to ordain women, their arguments are not that women aren't persons. Their arguments have changed over the years, which indicates there may be an underlying reason why they don't want to ordain women, and so if one argument doesn't work, you sort of back up and formulate another argument. But their arguments have to do with the importance of gender differentiation, the importance of a sort of dramatic personification of Jesus Christ as male, and that Jesus didn't ordain any women. Of course, Jesus didn't ordain anybody, and we don't know how close the women disciples were to Jesus. And there are lots of reasons for the 12 that don't have anything to do with ordination, etc. Well, it's a complex historical question, but it seems to me those questions have, by and large, at least as far as I can understand it, have been put to rest for those who are willing to hear them. The basic underlying opposition to ordaining women in the Catholic Church through the centuries have not been just gender differentiation. They have been that women are inferior to men. They're persons, but they're not able to do the intellectual work. They can't preach, and therefore it would not be good for the church if they were in leadership positions. That's one argument. Nobody makes that argument today, interestingly enough. The second one was, and it was not always explicitly articulated, but it underlay a lot of the arguments, which is that we're worried about symbols. Women have been connected with symbols of evil. Now, most women, when they first hear that, say, well, that can't be so. We're supposed to be good, and all that. But in fact, traditionally, even in the Bible, the whore, think of the image of the whore, the harlot, the temptress, from Eve right on, the use of those symbols, it's in the language of the Christian tradition everywhere. And we say, well, that's all right, we understand that. It certainly isn't relevant here. But some, as old as you and I are, will remember that there was a time when women were not allowed into the sanctuary of a church. Even when they were married, they could come in 2 steps to say the vows and then back out. If they were nuns taking care of the altars, they sort of crept in and crept out. And when, after Vatican II, we started having lay extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist, well, now they're generally accepted, although it's geographically different from place to place. But it was not uncommon to see the congregation line up to receive the Eucharist from the priest and from a male lay minister of the Eucharist, and a very short line in front of the female one. And it made you wonder, what is different? The female's fingers aren't quite as worthy as the male fingers. I mean, there is something deep in the symbol structure that has to be directly addressed, and until it is, people have this unreflected upon sort of sense that it's not quite appropriate to have women ordained. The third one is, ironically, that women can't do what a priest is supposed to do, which is to represent God to the people and the people to God. Why not? Well, even though we believe there's no gender in God, still all our images of God have been pretty much masculine. And so a male is more appropriate as someone to represent God to the people, which is why feminist scholars have addressed the question of doctrine of God. What does this mean? To limit God in a way that contradicts our beliefs about God. Secondly, you would think then, of course, that at least women could represent the people, sort of the male God in relation to the female people. But no, women can't represent the people to God either. Why? Because the generic human is male. It's like Virginia Woolf went to the British Museum and looked in a card catalog once and said, I'm going to look under woman. And there were books and books and books, mostly written by men, about what it means to be a woman. Then she said, well, I'll look under man. She looked under man and it said, see human person. there is, again, it may even be at an unconscious level, a deep sense that the male is the generic human. This is why it's an issue whether we use inclusive language or not. People say, oh, it doesn't matter, we're using the male generically. But the point is, it isn't generic. So here we have all those reasons. If they're addressed critically, they don't hold up. What about presenting Jesus Christ? Well, you could take that to a level, which some people do. Well, then the priest has to be Jewish and has to wear long hair or whatever. Well, I think that's probably not the best response to that argument. But if one says, what was the most important thing about the incarnation? Was it that Jesus was male, or was it that he was human? And what do we believe about the risen Christ? We believe the risen Christ incorporates in himself the whole of humanity, male and female. So now, to represent Jesus Christ adequately, we should have neither only males nor only females, but the whole of humanity. So I think there are no theological reasons. The Vatican Biblical Commission said there are no biblical reasons against that would prohibit ordaining. The theological community has said the arguments from tradition do not hold up. I think sooner or later, what seems now a matter only of sensibilities, not real theological reasoning, will have to be seen through. And the church really, the point you were making, the church needs more ministers, and it's drawing from much too limited a pool. So to deprive Catholics who put up with terrible preaching through generations, because the Eucharist is at the heart of our lives and our ritual, to deprive them of that will turn out to be something I think the Spirit will not allow. So I'm hopeful, but it's distressing that the hard work that's been done on these issues seems so far to have, become important to the faithful, if you trust the polls, but so far not to have brought about any changes, even opening up preaching to women, or even ordination to the diaconate and that sort of thing. And those are probably the first steps we'll take.